Here's a free marketing idea for any company that wants to take it up. And it's this concept of the test drive. If you're buying a vehicle, you almost always get some kind of test drive first. It's free and it's an easy way for the salesperson to convince the driver to buy that vehicle or buy one of their many vehicles because it is compelling. To get your hands on a product, test it out, is far more valuable than almost anything else when it comes to converting someone from something they're comfortable with to something they've never tried before. There's a lot of risk associated with changing things up. If you're comfortable in your car, why would you get a new one? There's just too much risk associated. What if it doesn't feel right? What if it doesn't drive right? So you give them the test drive, let them test it out, show them all the bells and whistles. And this is something sorely lacking from the camera market. The only good way to test a camera out is by renting it, which costs you money. You have $100, $200, $300, depending on how often you're filming or shooting. You need to do that frequently, and that can be kind of expensive to really get the most out of the camera during that time. Alternatively, you can always do the Amazon buy and return kind of system that a lot of people are fans of, where they buy the product from Amazon, they test it out, and they ship it right back, a free return. Now, that kind of exploits the system. It takes advantage of a thing that's meant to be there for unhappy customers. If you're just exploiting it, maybe there's an ethical dilemma there. But really, there's no good way to test drive a camera, which, from my perspective, is the biggest thing holding most people back from switching from Canon or Sony or Nikon or Lumix or Olympus or Fuji or anything. Any one of these companies could and should offer more free services getting these bodies into the hands of consumers, especially when it's a small niche market already. You don't have a lot of people buying cameras, certainly not as many as you did back in the day. Everyone's got a camera in their pocket with their smartphone. So why would I buy an expensive, bulky, bigger camera? Now I need custom, special lenses, and these lenses don't work with this camera body. Like, it all makes sense to us, but for your regular average consumer, they don't get why you can't use Canon lenses on a Sony body or why you can't use Nikon lenses on a Lumix body or vice versa. It doesn't make sense to them. It's just lenses. Why can't I use it? Oh, the mount is proprietary and all these things. So there's a lot of friction there to making the purchase unless you're already invested in the industry, which if you're watching this, you probably are. And I would really appreciate the option to test drive cameras. Like, I think that would be awesome. And it is the case for a lot of YouTube reviewers that they get their hands on with these things. These companies ship them out. It's never happened to me, so I haven't had that opportunity. But I think that should be an option for regular consumers as well. You shouldn't have to be a YouTube critic or reviewer to get your hands on these products. If you want to convince someone, let's take Lumix for example. That's my favorite. I shoot Lumix for a lot of reasons that I've talked about in the past. Shutter angle, open gate, a really easy to navigate menu, packed with video features, great in-body image stabilization, excellent phase detect autofocus now in video, lots of compelling stuff. But for me to convince a Sony shooter or a Canon shooter that Lumix is superior or better, they're not going to get it because they're so comfortable with what they're currently shooting. And even if I give them a Lumix camera for a day, it's going to be awkward. It's going to be uncomfortable. They're not going to really get it right away because that's the same way I feel about Canon or Sony or anything, right? When you change systems, it's just like changing from like Mac to Windows or Windows to Mac or iPhone to Android or Android to iPhone. There's that learning curve, and you need a lot of time to get past that learning curve in a way that is frictionless. So if I'm renting a camera and I'm trying it out and all of a sudden it doesn't work the way I expected it to, and I paid for that experience, that's really unfortunate. Now, if a camera company were willing to give me a test drive, send out a camera free of charge, use it. Maybe there's some kind of security deposit, but you get it back once they get the camera back, make it safe for the camera company as well. Then I think there's a lot of opportunity there to actually put these things through their paces in a way that doesn't exploit Amazon's return system. It doesn't cost me money with Lens Rentals or any of the other rental companies. And you would have a lot more people experimenting and trying things out and seeing how features like shutter angle or open gate are actually game changing. I actually prefer the Lumix menu system, but there's a lot of people who find it goofy and wonky because they're just not familiar with it, where they like the Sony or Canon menu. And I find those all, just not as ideal. I don't think there's any perfect camera menu. The best one, my favorite, is probably the Blackmagic, just touchscreen menu. I think the way they've designed that is awesome. But, everyone's got their favorite, their personal preference. If you're a Nikon shooter, maybe you love the Nikon menu. But the moment you get your hands on a different camera, you're immediately going to be skeptical, because that's just the nature of human beings. If it's something unfamiliar, we kind of pull back and we say, no, this is not for me. I don't like it. So you have to take as much friction out of that equation as possible, make it free, get into people's hands, get into more people's hands, not just the YouTube reviewers, because even they have their own, what matters to a YouTube reviewer may not matter to the actual end consumer that's using the thing for whatever project is that, if they're doing photography, whether it's wildlife, sports, events, weddings, who knows? If it's video, maybe they're shooting music videos, short films, documentaries. I don't know. But you really have to get the product in the person's hands without the friction of making the purchase and then returning it or having to rent it. So I really like the idea of a test drive for cameras, but it doesn't seem to be an option anywhere. Maybe back in the day, you could kind of walk into a Best Buy and get your hands on cameras, but the cameras nowadays, everything's an online transaction. It's very hard to go into a store to test something out. Maybe you're fortunate enough and you have a camera shop nearby where you live, but there could even, events, like I said, use it as a marketing stunt, or just have some, shippable return program where, the manufacturer, the only cost associated with them is shipping these things out, which they're doing all the time for reviewers. Open that up to more people. Let them sign up. Like I said, have some kind of security deposit. So if they steal the camera or they break it or whatever, it's not a complete loss. But where we can get our hands on more things more frequently and actually test them out. Because unless I have a compelling reason to rent something, I'm not going to spend hundreds of dollars just renting cameras to test them out to see which one's the best. And even then, I have to know somebody and borrow their camera, which is hard if you're a smaller, in a smaller market. Maybe you have a smaller friend group. Maybe where you're at, there's just certain cameras that just aren't popular. Everyone's shooting Sony for whatever reason, and you can't find any Canon cameras, or vice versa. I think we need to take out the friction because, again, this market is shrinking. There's maybe a few more people nowadays who are like the resurgence of content creators and people wanting higher quality cameras than their iPhone. There's certainly something to be said for that. But in general, I think it's not the booming industry that it once was. You're marketing and catering to a smaller and smaller group of people. Those demographics are shrinking, but there's still a lot of value to be made if you can make a compelling case of why your thing is so much better than everyone else's. And the best way to do that is to get it in their hands. From my understanding, I don't think there might be a Sony or Canon dealer in the same way you have car dealerships, but I've never heard of one for Lumix. And I don't think Sony and Canon ones exist. They certainly have their events, but they're always, exclusive. It's a small handful of people who are invited. And I think the more we can open that up to regular people, the more informed and the better decision-making can happen, because there's so many things about Lumix, for example, because I'll use that one because that one's personal to me, but it probably applies to you with whatever you're shooting, Sony or Canon, Nikon, doesn't matter. There's so many things about Lumix that are hard to quantify until I get it in your hands and you see what you've been missing. Shutter angle, open gate are kind of the obvious ones, but there's a lot of other ones, just all the options in the menu, which I probably will make a video about at some point. There's so many buried features. Even the stabilization is really hard to quantify unless you're the one holding the camera and seeing how stable it actually is. You can watch videos on YouTube of people doing A/B comparisons, but until you get it in your hands and you feel how good that IBIS is, it kind of clicks. And same thing with the phase detect autofocus. Everyone's shooting in different environments, different types of subjects. To have it applied to your own footage, your own project, is a far better selling point than anything on the Amazon page in terms of marketing, the features. Most of the features are all the same now when it comes to all these different companies. So you're making an investment in a platform and an ecosystem that is hard to break away from unless you really feel the difference. And I think that's what's missing and why people are so hesitant to switch. Yes, you're invested in lenses and that's a whole thing. Once you buy the glass, you're going to keep buying those camera bodies because it just makes sense. So there's some, sunk cost there associated with it. But with lenses and cameras, you can always go sell them. There's some friction there, and it's harder to maybe make your money back than what you certainly paid for it, depending on the camera body. Some camera bodies actually go up in value over time, depending on their availability. But in general, like, you can always sell your stuff to switch systems, but you need the compelling reason to want to switch in the first place. And YouTube videos go a long way in hyping people up and getting them to, oh, okay, I'm going to switch over and make this investment. And certainly, when the feature specs on B&H or Amazon, they also kind of tell that story to a certain degree. But I think there's a lot more people who won't switch, who are hesitant to switch, just because they don't understand what it feels like to shoot with something different, because they've never been exposed to that opportunity, and they're not going to go out of their way to spend hundreds of, if not thousands of dollars to test it out for themselves. And I have the same experience whenever I shoot with Sony or Canon or Nikon. I end up appreciating all the Lumix features that I take for granted. I forget to talk about them. But the moment I go to some other system and I'm like, wait, how do I do this? How do I activate this thing that I'm so used to on Lumix? It's like, oh, that doesn't exist, or, oh, you can't, or it's really clunky. You got to dig through the menu. And I go, oh, well, shoot. Then yeah, obviously I'm going to stick with Lumix. But that's a hands-on experience that's only quantified in that very personal one-on-one test drive way. That is never going to be on an Amazon sheet. It's never going to be on a B&H spec sheet. It's likely not going to be in a YouTube video unless it's really down the rabbit hole of something oddly specific in a niche fringe case scenario. But that's the stuff that we encounter all the time. My needs are different than your needs. So when I actually use the thing, I actually get to experience what it's like to use it for my work versus just hearing what someone else did and what their experience was like and why it's so great for them. And then I test it out and go, oh, never mind. This is the case with the G9 Mark II, for example, the Lumix G9 Mark II. Everyone was talking about how great the video features are, and this is just like a GH6 with phase detect, and isn't this amazing? The Lumix G9 Mark II, incredible video features, incredible video features, incredible video features. And then I actually go buy one, and I test it out, and I go, this thing overheats. And everyone comes back saying, well, you never said it was a video camera. Well... What were you talking about? The whole reason I bought the thing is because everyone had talked about how great the video features were. And now you're saying it's not a video camera. Okay, well, I had to have that personal experience myself to really test it out. And that my reaction to that would have been a whole lot better had that transaction been a free test drive than a, hey, you bought this thing, or hey, you rented this thing and you paid money to be let down. That sucks, right? No one wants to go through that experience. So take it for what you will. If there's some camera company, someone in their marketing department watching this video, figure out a way that you can offer test drives to people, everybody, not just YouTube reviewers, but everybody. Because I think you'd actually, if you have a good product, you'd probably move the needle quite a bit. Because what happens is people do the test drive, they make the switch. Well, now you've got more word of mouth marketing, which again is the most powerful. Just because the more chatter there is, the more noise there is about a thing, the more it's in everyone else's brains thinking, well, maybe I should test that out. Maybe I should go check it out. And the cycle completes. More people go test drive, they buy, word of mouth, and so on and so on and so on. You can make big waves that way. Instead of expecting, a YouTube reviewer to put out a video saying how great this camera is and you need to buy it. Everyone watching is going, sounds nice, but I'm pretty comfortable with what I have. What's the incentive for me to switch just because some YouTube reviewer says it's the best thing ever? They say that about every camera that comes out. So getting it hands-on, one-on-one, in a I don't know, a weekly cadence, right? Because there's not a lot you can get out of a camera in one day. You can't get the most out of it in one day. But if you have it for about a week, I think you can really put it through its paces, test it out. For the G9 Mark II, it actually took me probably a couple months to really explore that camera to its fullest, to find all the cracks and wrinkles and the gotchas and all the things I love about the G9 Mark II. I didn't return it. I didn't sell it. I still have that camera. I just now know what it's for, and I use it for certain things and not for others. So getting that test drive option out there, I think would be very smart from a marketing perspective, and something I don't see happening. If it is happening, I'm certainly unaware of it. And I think it would actually get quite a bit of use from the people who would be, who could become the most loyal consumers, enthusiasts of whatever product it might be.